Hello writers, come write with me. My name is Michaela Greenwood. I create worlds for mind adventures. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Write with Michaela. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell so you can go on this journey with me. Today is Friday, which is story time, or the day of our chapter exchange. I'm hoping to get chapters from you from either plot. It's never too late to send in for plot 1. Your work will be extra videos, but everything else will be the same for my viewers. I will label chapters from plot 1, season 1, plot 2, season 2, as I've said before. If you're writing with me and you wish to exchange chapters, then send your chapter with written permission to writewithmichaela@gmail.com. I will post the email address at the end of the video. Please do not send Google Docs. I'm looking forward to reading your chapters, even if I can't read them all on the channel. All chapters read on Fridays, whether they are mine or another writer's work, are copyright protected material, and no one may use any part in writing their own stories. This story is also PG-13, so if you were under 13 years of age, you need parental guidance. This story is in its rough draft stage, just as the last story we heard. The title of this story is Tajiia, and today we are reading chapter 7. If you would like to read along, then send to the email I stated above and request a PDF of the chapter. Make sure you're specific, either City of the Ancients or Tajiia, in which chapter. I don't promise everything will match. After I read chapter 6 last Friday, I went back into the book and started editing, and I put in I think 1,100 words in that chapter, so they won't necessarily match, but that's what this is about. You're getting to see the raw, the rough, everything, and then you can fix your own and know that when you write the first draft, it's not going to come out nice and perfect. It's going to need touches here and there because, you think of things and things are going in your mind, and it doesn't necessarily make it to the paper as smoothly as you would like. And sometimes your brain is going so fast and you can't type that fast, and then you go and you read it and you'll find things are missing. Or in last week when I was reading, also I found 2 mistakes. That's why I got back in to edit it, because I was reading to you and I found is instead of his, so somehow that H just got left off. And then another place I found her hand instead of his hand. I think I read both of those things correctly in the video. I had to go back and fix them. Then once I got in there, I was editing things. So just have fun with it and know that a first draft is not a final draft. So let's start with Tajiia chapter 7, For Wind Protection. In the morning, when Arshwaya woke, she saw Tajiia standing and looking down. Arshwaya looked down at the ground and saw 2 robins. Then Tajiia looked at her like she expected some answer. Started Arshwaya. Then she glanced around. Just 3 of us. Tajiia looked back to the birds. Arshwaya woke Tharkek. We have our ride. Huh? What? Asked Tharkek. Then he saw Arshwaya motion to Tajiia. Oh yeah, our ride. I'll tell Artur. In no time at all, the 3 of them were flying off. The birds had thought to Tajiia that they would have to make several stops, and Tajiia thought that was fine. As they were flying off, Tajiia was thinking which village to Arshwaya. Arshwaya confirmed which village with Tharkek, and then she thought it to Tajiia. Artur roused everyone else, and they started walking once again, along with the squirrel and the rabbit. As they started walking along, some took out a bite or 2 of their provisions, but some cupped their hands in front of themselves. When Artur saw them do that, he stopped the group and hurried back to the rectangle of air and found that it was not there. Artur motioned the group on. After a few minutes, several people's hands held flames. Artur noted down to himself who was successful. He glanced over to Chancellor Wyckoff and decided later he would talk to him about adding some tests. Then he cupped his hands before himself and said the spell, since Tajiia had said it loud enough for him to hear. Flames erupted and flared out. "Ow!" he hollered as he spread his hands apart. The fire fell to the ground and started spreading. Several started stomping on the flames, and a few were mindful enough to say a spell of water. After a minute, whatever part of the flame that no one had doused or stomped on went out. "Okay, time is necessary," stated Artur. "Jeez, oh jeez, that was hot." He looked around and asked a few if their fire had been hot. Most shook their heads. Ozzy said, "I didn't remember the words for heat. I only remembered the words for light." Artur slowly nodded his head, and he looked around the group. Several shrugged. Merc said, "What is the word for heat?" More shrugs. "Callan something," said Bollock. "Callants," replied Artur. He started walking as he thought. He realized that most of the ones that held flames and had success didn't have Tajiia's success. He glanced around until he found Chancellor Wyckoff. "I want you to list down what each person said." "And thought," put in Alla. Then she quickly looked down and was embarrassed. "No, go ahead, Alla," stated Artur. "I've said words a whole bunch of times," replied Alla as she glanced at her mentor and then looked at Artur. "But I watched Ozzy's flame and thought of her flame when I said the words last night." "Okay, words and thoughts," stated Artur. "No one talk about your spell until Chancellor Wyckoff records your words." Many realized why Artur was giving the instructions, and many realized that they hadn't remembered all the words Tajiia had taught them to say. Ozzy looked at her hands and realized Artur had burned his hands. So even if words were easier to remember with meaning, she still needed to think about the actual meaning. She repeated the word "callants" in her mind several times, and she would have to add that to her paper where she had left a blank. She glanced over to her cousin Bollock, and he seemed to be saying the word to himself. Arswaya helped Tajiia direct the robins to the village. The robins had already landed 4 or 5 times. Then the robins were flying over the village, and Arswaya confirmed it was the right one. Arswaya looked around at all the soldiers on horses in the village, along with all the huntsmen. Thankfully, she didn't see handlers with their dogs. Tajiia had the robins land on a rooftop near the center of the village, and then she magically untied them and set them on the roof. Even though they were extra small, Tajiia wanted to make them invisible as well, but she refrained from adding the spell. The robins flew off. The 3 of them heard a lot of commotion, and they looked out across the village to ascertain what was going on. Huntsmen and soldiers were dragging young girls to the center platform. The girls were all about Tajiia's age. "Oh my," whispered Arswaya. "Most of those girls aren't even ours." Dushler rushed to a soldier. "Wait, wait," he called. The soldier turned back. At that moment, everyone heard the loud cry of a cat, and they saw a big cat chasing a rat. The rat ran up the dress of a girl and jumped onto the soldier that Dushler was trying to talk to. The girl realized the cat was going to climb her, so she shrieked and tried to get away. The cat bounded on the girl's shoulder and then jumped to the soldier, which caused the soldier to release the girl. The rat ran on as everyone nearby watched it go. Dushler felt something more might be going on. He was going to give Tajiia's name for the release of his daughter, but now he would just proclaim his daughter's innocence if the soldier asked him what he was going to say. Thark Ch whispered to Arshwaya, "In the woods, saddles fell off horses. We could do that." Arshwaya nodded, and they started magically untying cincher straps on the saddles of the horses. The rat finally ran under a water trough and down in his hole, and the cat was peering under the trough. A few times it swatted under the trough, but now it just stared. The wind picked up and started blowing things around. The commander looked around at all the chaos and started ordering the soldiers to tie things down. Once the soldiers started concentrating on that, all the parents rushed to their daughters and ushered them inside their homes. Arshwaya glanced at Tajiia, and she looked angry. She looked around the village. The flying debris was spooking horses, and saddles indeed were falling over to the side and causing the horses to start bucking. The commander ordered some soldiers to get the horses under control, when suddenly boards from the platform loosened enough to fly off the platform. The boards flew right into the commander. The commander threw his arm in front of his face. Tajiia, indeed, was angry, as she realized that many, or most, of the girls were not witches and were innocent. She recalled a story she had read in her witch books and decided that was what she needed to do. It was a call of protection. So she first called upon the sands of time with no grains, and then she recounted the protections she wanted. At first she said for the innocent people, but then she decided the protection should extend to anyone allied with her, because she didn't want the universe to translate innocent to mean those who did not belong to the witching world. In the story, the magic marked the area and clearly told of the protection. So Tajiia magically put down stone markers outside the four winds of the village. After she finished, she thought of her birthday present and decided she needed to get that out of her home before soldiers thought they could, before they had rights to go inside her home and take things. Thark Ch and Arshwaya didn't know what spells she worked, but they kept their eyes peeled for whatever commotion it would be, and they hoped to gain more ideas. They wondered if the wind was obeying Tajiia, or if that was just good luck. The village was clearing out, with people sheltering in their homes. Some soldiers sheltered in the stables, and others went into the homes with the people. Thark Ch and Arshwaya wanted to talk with Thesler to see what they could learn, and Thark Ch thought he could work the spell to make Thesler small, and he wanted to try it before Tajiia did the spell. Tajiia turned to them. "I have to visit my house," she said. Arshwaya stopped her protest of the danger. Here Tajiia could do things they hadn't seen in generations, maybe not even in centuries. Arshwaya didn't even know what all the spells Tajiia worked were. She slowly nodded her head. "We were going to try to talk with Thesler. Thark Ch thinks he can shrink him. How much time for us to be small?" "I think until dusk or a little before," replied Tajiia. "I use Dasin Fradin Nucha Dix Dasin." "Okay. I think I can talk to a bird and tie us on," continued Arshwaya. "So you go do what you need to do, and we will meet you back wherever Archor is." Thark Ch wanted to put a hand on Arshwaya's arm to let her know that he didn't think they should split up, but he didn't. Instead, he glanced down at the village center and saw all the saddles here and there. He leaned a little more to look for the cat, and he didn't see the cat. He thought to himself that cats chased rats. So how could anyone consider that magic? He didn't think about the grains that Tajiia used. mostly because he didn't know the numbers and which that well yet. The wind died down a lot, although there were bursts of breezes here and there. So Tajiia called a grackle and headed to her village. Arshwaya watched her fly off. Then she turned to Tharkek. We probably need a few provisions as well. People didn't come to the tree thinking they wouldn't make it home. I agree. I also think we should try to use our floating spell when there isn't so much wind. Arshwaya nodded. They walked to the edge and looked out over the village. They didn't know exactly which house was Thustler's, but they had seen which direction he had ushered his daughter in. They both floated down. They were so small that they would look like dust to anyone who saw them. Tharkek floated to the window of the first house and Arshwaya to the second. They kept viewing the people in every other house until finally Arshwaya found Thustler's house. They floated down and walked under the door. Then they floated up to the mantel. They would wait to see if they could catch Thustler alone before they shrank him. Tajiia got to her village and her house without incident. She had read Tharkek's thoughts about floating, and she had to admit that the floating spell was marvelous and made up for how slow she would go if she were walking while small. Tajiia was still very scared and nervous inside her home, so she said the invisibility spell before she released or reversed the small spell. Then, after peeking outside, she went to an inside room. She found the fake floorboard. Her mother had told her about the present every birthday that Tajiia could remember while her mother was alive. Tajiia reached down in the cubby hole and pulled the wrap box out. Every year she admired the blue ribbon and the crisp white paper. Every year she gently shook the box and held it to her ear. She did those things now. Suddenly, there was a loud knock on her door. The knock startled Tajiia greatly. She magically replaced the floorboard and spread out the rug. She magically shrunk the gift and put it in a pocket as she headed to an outer room. She heard the soldiers ramming the door, and then they burst open the door. Tajiia instinctively looked down at herself to make sure she was still invisible. Thankfully, she was. She hurried to the back door as the soldiers cautiously looked around before stepping in. Tajiia wanted to know what they were going to do in her home or to her home, but she wanted to get away from there. She had the gift, so she shrunk herself down and walked under the back door. Then she used the floating spell and lifted herself up into the nearest tree. Then she felt anger at the soldiers who just broke in her house, and for no good reason. So she said the protection spell over her village, and she added the curse that the harm intended turned back onto the perpetrator. The grackle found her, and she once again left her village. She knew the grackle would stop many times on the way to Artur, but he probably wouldn't stop as many times as the robins. The robins had. As the soldiers dumped out drawers and boxes to search through the things in Tajiia's house, their saddlebags emptied, and their armor came off and flew across the house. Although the soldiers in the house didn't know about the saddlebags, soldiers near those reported the incidents to the commander. When the soldiers' armor flew off, the soldiers became unnerved and went out to consult the commander. The commander felt the house was evidence of a witch, so he commanded that the house be set on fire. When the soldiers tried to carry out the commands, they caught on fire and ran through the village screaming until they saw the troughs of water. The soldiers on fire jumped in the troughs. Mr. Dwandles yelled from the pillory, "The forbidden magic has returned, and it protects the village. The soldiers cannot harm us. Check for the stones at the four winds to read the protections." Several villagers had eased their doors open a little to hear what Mr. Dwandles was saying, but they couldn't quite make it out. The commander heard, So he ordered 4 soldiers to the 4 winds to see if there were stones there. As Tajiia flew towards Artur, she realized there were many villages and one paranoid king. If 2 villages had the protection and the others didn't, then many innocents might suffer. So she directed the grackle closer to all the villages she knew about, and when she got close enough, she cast the protection spell and the curse. Tharkek and Arswaya found Artur's group, and they had to reverse the small spell set over them. Then they passed out what little rations they had been able to collect after they reversed their own small spells on those. They felt Tajiia should have arrived before them, and they both worried that they should not have let her go, at least not alone. They discussed their concerns with Artur Raisler and Chancellor Wycroft. Artur waved his hand dismissively. I'm not worried about her. She can cast spells that span her lifetime. She can go invisible or small. She learns whatever we do in front of her. Only her fire is heat and light. And what we showed her was probably only light. Her spells are bitter. At this, he showed them his red and swollen hands. I'm not sure I want to use her spells. How did she not burn her hands? I've listened to many stories, from dogs jumping on an invisible wall, to arrows turning back on themselves and killing the very person that shot the arrow. He shook his head. I tell you, I'm not worried about her safety. Now, does she know how to check on witches who the archers hit with the poisoned arrow? No, not yet, but she will learn. Raisler thought through Artur's words. I have to agree with Artur. I also don't think we have to worry about her not returning at all. I know she doesn't like being around so many people, but she won't abandon us. Arswaya turned to Tharkek. I didn't even think about that. Arswaya, dear, started Chancellor Wycroft. Are you not the one who always says that what's done is done? Worry will not fix it now? Arswaya smiled. Yes, I do say that. Well then, I won't worry. And she has already taught us a lot. While we're on the subject, stated Chancellor Wycroft, Artur thinks we should add tests to the books. And I agree. I also think we are in no position to question Tajiia on her whereabouts, when and if she returns. Arswaya nodded. Yes, I was thinking once we were in the mountains with the tree put down, we could have her take the queen test. Tharkek rubbed Arswaya's back. Arswaya turned to him. I don't need comforting. I'm much relieved we found Tajiia. I mean, look at how we escaped the soldiers with the dogs. If not for Tajiia, many of us would be dead already. They continued walking. Every now and then someone would practice a spell, or they would all start counting in which, and when they did, Tharkek listened intently, but they didn't go too high. Near dusk, a grackle landed on Artur's shoulder. Artur put his hand to the bird. I do believe Tajiia would want you on the ground. He got the bird on his hand and then bent down to the ground. He straightened up, and the grackle flew right back to his shoulder. Then suddenly Tajiia was normal size and visible before them. He's agreed not to go yet, she said. I need a map, or a village count. Everyone exchanged glances. I found 13 villages, not counting mine not counting mine and Thustler's, said Tajiia. Actually, if there are more villages, then I will need a map. After their conversation earlier, they knew they could not question her, so they weren't sure what to say. I can sketch out a map if we find an area with more dirt, stated Raisler. He motioned with his thumb towards Artur. And Artur can help. One witch pulled out paper and pen and ink, and Raisler started drawing with input from several. Tajiia and the Grackle looked on. After Raisler drew everything, they recounted again and again. Several in the group pointed out their village, but it seemed there were only 15 that they collectively knew about. Tajiia thought her thanks to the Grackle, and he flew off. Arswaya wanted to know what was going on, but she wasn't sure how to ask. But Autor said to her quietly, "Something is bothering Tajiia. I can see it easily, and she has thus far been hard to read." Arswaya went to Tajiia quietly and said, "Are you okay, dear?" Tajiia first thought about what she wanted to say, and then she translated to human for them. "My mom always told me to think about things before doing them, so I would know how I would affect things. But I didn't think, and I put a lot of people in danger. The king is so paranoid. I think I covered my mistake, but if I forgot or missed a village, it will not be good. Dear, I'm sure you did your best, and that's all anyone can ever ask," stated Arswaya. "Do you want to rest here?" Tajiia shrugged. "I guess." Everyone sat down on the ground, and the squirrel and rabbit went over to sit in Tahia's lap. Many of them wished for a fire, but didn't chance it. Tajiia sensed they wanted a fire as she heard the thoughts in her mind from several of them. So she put up the air wall like she did before, and in the middle of the camp a huge fire burst forth from the ground. Instantly, several people looked in the direction they had come from. "No worries," stated Artur. "We can see through the air wall, but if you go on the other side, you won't be able to see us." Bollock was instantly on his feet. "Can I go check it out?" he asked Varant. Varant tilted his head and shrugged. "I don't see why not." Bollock took off running with Ozzy right behind him. Ozzy stopped a second and motioned to Allah to follow. Tajiia just stroked the rabbit and the squirrel. Carmise walked over to Tajiia. "Arswaya and Tharkek brought back some biscuits and cheese. Do you want some?" Tajiia smiled slightly. "That would be nice. I guess I should have made something when I was at home." "None of us knew we were going to be out here this long," stated Carmise, and she handed over some provisions to Tajiia. Bollock was amazed that he couldn't see the group. He got Ozzy to stay on the other side as he went back around. He looked through the air wall and saw Ozzy and Allah. He ran back around and said, "Go see, I'll stay here." Ozzy and Allah went around, and they couldn't see Bollock. Then Bollock motioned them back around to the far side of the wall. He tried to walk right through the wall, the air wall, into camp. Into the camp he couldn't see. Only he smashed into the wall and fell back. Tajiia looked over. Why would he do that? "He's probably testing it," stated Carmise. "Boys do things differently than girls." "If it bothers you, we can ask him to stop," said Telka as she walked up. "No, don't," said Tajiia as she swiveled to face away from the wall. "I want to feel it. Tell him to touch it differently." Telka looked at Carmise, who shrugged. Telka walked on to tell Bollock. Varant and Merk followed behind. They hadn't heard what Tajiia had said, but they wanted to make sure to keep a watch on their mentee. When Telka gave the instruction, Bollock asked Varant, "How do I touch it differently?" Varant laughed. "Don't walk into it. Just touch it or tap it." Ozzy was curious, so she slid her hand across the surface of the wall, while Bollock stuck his finger out and poked the wall. Telka walked back to Tajiia. After several minutes, Tajiia looked at Telka and Carmise. "Tell them to stop for a minute. I want to try something." Telka got up and went back around and gave the message. She told them she would signal them. She walked to the edge of the air and made motions to Carmise. "When you're ready, I'll let them know," Carmise said to Tajiia. "I'm ready," said Tajiia. Carmise motioned to Telka, and Telka relayed the message to Bollock. Bollock decided to slap the air wall. And when he did, water splashed over him, but it was the slimy water, and it clung to him. Bollock held his arms out away from himself. What is this? Telka laughed behind her hand. Well, Tajiia said she wanted to try something. Carmise motioned to Telka. Hold on, Ozzy, Telka called to her. Ozzy wasn't sure she wanted to touch the wall anymore as she watched her cousin walk back around. Varant followed Bollock. Okay, try, stated Telka. Ozzy stuck out her hand and then pulled it back. Merc slightly pushed her shoulder. Go on and touch the wall. Ozzy did. She rubbed her hand against the wall like she had the first time. Water sprayed around her just like it had with Bollock. Only her water glowed with golden light, sparkling within. The water clung to her like she was wearing an extra suit. She, too, walked back around with her arms held out from her sides. Merc decided to do his own test, so he found a stick and reached out and touched the wall with the stick. At first, lighted water swirled around the stick, and then it paused halfway down. Merc tilted his head and stared at the glowing lights and the stick. He could see where the water was on the stick and where it was not. Merc tried to pull the stick away, but the airwall pulled it back. Merc tried again. This time, when the wall pulled the stick back, it pulled in Merc as it shrunk him down. Everyone looked at the dwarf-sized Merc as he pressed his face and hands against the wall from the inside. Bollock and Ozzy were laughing at him, as were several others in the group. Then Tajiia reversed the spell and released all three. She told Carmise that she wanted to speak to the three. Bollock, Ozzy, and Merc went over to her, with several others trailing behind. What did you do to me? Asked Bollock. I thought we were on the same side. Varant put his hand on Bollock's shoulder. Could you breathe? And could you move easily enough? Asked Tajiia. Yes, replied Bollock. Yes to both. He felt like since he answered her questions with yes, then no one would believe she wasn't on their side. Ozzy? Asked Tajiia. Yes, I could breathe and move, and I glowed, replied Ozzy. That was awesome. She exchanged glances with Alla, and Alla returned her smile. I swirled, stated Merc. All of a sudden I went swirling around, and I shrank. I didn't know what to think when I was inside the wall, but I could breathe. I couldn't move so much. I was pretty trapped. Well, I want to thank all three of you, stated Tajiia. Bollock gave me some ideas, and I wanted to test them, and the three of you allowed me to test. I was not against you, and I thought you wanted to help me get ideas to use on the soldiers. Bollock looked down, somewhat embarrassed. We do want to help you, stated Ozzy, enthusiastic. I think what you did to Merc was perfect for the soldiers. Tajiia smiled at Ozzy. Thank you, she said. Now I think I will sleep. Everyone took their cues and walked away to lay down on the ground. Tajiia wanted to open her present, but she would wait until tomorrow morning. Okay, writers, that is the end of Chapter 7. In Chapter 6, we had a vision of someone betraying Tajiia, and soon after they arrived in the village, that vision was coming true. But as Tajiia saw the soldiers just arresting girls, she realized that nothing or no one had protection from these soldiers, so she went to get her present. Then she tried some ideas for her air walls, and that was more relaxing than it was in the village with all the commotion. One question I have in my mind at this time in the story is Mr. Dwandles. Does someone slip him food? Do the soldiers make sure he has food? I'm not sure how I want to handle it or if it is detail that is needed in my story, but I will decide what to do on the next edit run. Also, on this read, I noticed a couple of items of foreshadowing, but I'll not spoil things for you. When we talked about foreshadowing, I told you that you would probably include items of foreshadowing without thinking about it. I also told you when you use a flashback to make sure your readers are aware of the time. On Tuesday, when we added to our scary cave, I'm sure you and any reader were aware of the time. I don't know why it says permission there. I'm sure you were aware of the time of the plans, the pre. That's what it is. It's not permission. It's pre-mission. It's spelled incorrectly. Okay. Anyway, I'm sure you are aware of the pre-mission plans that were before the running and sliding in the cave. These are fun tools. Flashback, foreshadowing. As we read, you will have to see if you notice the foreshadowing that took place in this chapter. Leave a comment below on what you would have Tajiia try next with her air wall, or leave a comment on how you would feel if you were the girl the cat climbed. And just before the cat climbed you, how would you feel? Would you be shrieking, trying to get away? I think most of us would. Cats have pretty sharp claws there. Join me Tuesday for some jargon. Every Friday I tell you that what I read is copyright protected material. So we will discuss copyright protection and plagiarism. Of course, we will dip our toe into footnotes as well, because we can use footnotes to give proper credit instead of plagiarizing. Of course, there are also other uses for footnotes. I know this doesn't sound so fun, but there will not be a test. So let's just learn about these terms and get some knowledge, and have some fun just being together. Join me Friday for Chapter 8 of Tajiia, Mom. I hope you are enjoying writing your own stories. Don't forget to share your stories by sending them to writewithmichaela@gmail.com. That's the chapter exchange part where you share your chapters with me. Visit my website, bymichaela.com, and read some character bios. You could meet Kirsta or Gaul or both. And they're in Miacha 1. They're both dragons, and they are mates. So you can read about those two dragons. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and the bell so we can continue to write together. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate your participation. If you know someone who would like this video, then please share it with them. This is Michaela with Write with Michaela. Bye for now.